started. I'll turn down the music. Let me know if the music is still fairly loud or if this is like an acceptable level or really quiet. 45%, that looks decent. Maybe a bit less. I should be the focus of what's going on here. Alright. So... yeah, so... what we're going to be doing is taking a look at the maps that were submitted for the USA Cup map scripting contest. Specifically, the theme for that was national parks in the US. So you're supposed to make maps that were in some way inspired by one of the national parks. You can find a nice list of that by Googling, that's easy. And yeah, there was technically 2 months to make these maps, although many people, myself included, probably made them towards the end of that time period. I'm not involved in the judging in any way. I'm not going to rank them or give points. I'm just going to take a look at them and share my thoughts. I don't want to influence the judging, so I'm not going to give any ranking or anything like that. If you want to follow along, I'll be going through the submissions in the order they were submitted, from the top going down. And exactly, I will read the description, or if it's long, I'll skim through and highlight the important points. But in principle, I'm going to go through the Discord channel where the submissions were and do them in order and read what each person said there as we do it. So, I think we can get started. If you're joining later, I will have this... well, no point in telling people that. I should tell that to people who, at the end, anyone who's joining late isn't here yet. So, overlay, go away. I'm going to generate the first map called Redwood River. And then I'm going to take a peek at the description. So, inspired by Redwood National and State Parks and the Klamath River, recently undammed. Players start on an exposed grassland on either side of a large river. Geese wander around the marshes and deer can be found on the forest edge. A pair of beached whales to the west start with 600 food that is actively rotting away. The food does not automatically drop off at a mule cart or dock, but collects faster than any other food source. So maybe it's a dead predator, essentially. Salmon to the west start with 600 food. No, wait. Salmon are found in both the river and the bay, but a destructible beaver dam limits ship access. Islands within the river contain wood and gold. Players will need to fight bears for access to the deeper forest, stone quarry, and mythical creature beyond. Can players secure their base in the open, survive off fish, or will they be forced to retreat to the safety of the forests? So, let's take a peek at how we see that reflected here. These seem to be the islands that we're fighting for. We have the 2 players starting fairly close. We see the whales here. Seems to be... we'll take a look in-game afterwards to see what that actually looks like. Got some oysters. Yeah, players start here. They can... this is this dam here that's supposedly blocking ship access. Beaver Dam. We have several small groups of berry bushes. A very open start here. For one thing, woodlines. Well, I guess you can go for the central woodlines, but yeah, woodlines are far away from your TC here. There's a Gaia villager. You're saying there's a Gaia villager at the right side? This guy here.
Greeting?
Probably best to have that be unconvertible. I don't know. You don't really want Gaia units that convert players, because then, yeah, just rush to find them. I like these passages in the forest at the back. Fairly narrow. With some potentially unbuildable terrain here. Or potentially buildable. Alright. And the waterfall, making waterfalls is very difficult always. I think this is a pretty good representation within what's possible. So the paths are probably connections between lands, I would say, although maybe it's a bunch of lands. I don't know how far I want to dive into looking at the code on this stream, or the map scripts themselves on this stream. I think I won't go too heavily into that. If I take a peek, I see there are a decent number of lands, but it's not like the whole map is painted with lands. Let's generate it a few times. The layout is fundamentally similar. I think we do have connections making these passages. This river is very snaky. Yeah. And I guess you could wall wall early. It's very open around your base, but the wall off is fairly easy. 2 areas of water to contest. It's interesting. Let's just quickly boot it up. Let's reveal. I want to do Marco Polo. Red. These whales have food per the description, yeah. So it's a crocodile. One thing that you can do, actually, is you can... I don't know. You could probably change the icon of the crocodile and the name to use that of the whale, since we now actually have a whale object in-game. Just for flavor. Yeah, I was wondering about the large number of baobabs, but I guess when you're trying to represent redwoods, you do have the very tall trunk and thick trunk. That's probably as good as it's going to get, because the other pine trees are fairly small. So it's not bad. What other comments did I miss here?
Ready.
Let's just actually try to gather that villager and see. I think there's some sort of story here that I don't know. Oh, you have to go through the forest to get up to the top. Which... well, if you play with small trees, it's probably easier to see. There would be a passage here, too. Okay, and that's a fortified palisade. Which perhaps can be attacked by military units. Speed up time. Yeah, I don't know what the story is behind that bear. Beyond that it's the mythical creature in the forest. Can we destroy this? We can, but it's one damage per hit. Scout cavalry. Alright. Then let's take a look at the next map. I could leave No, we'll go back to this narrator. You can edit attributes to change the collision size, or like the size within the game data. That doesn't change the size of the graphics, though, as far as I know. So you can't make them appear larger. You can make mods that do that, but you can't do that in a map script, as far as I know. Next up, we're going to take a look at Voyageurs. And let's go read the description. Inspired by Fort Charlotte, now gone, in Voyageurs and the associated fur trade. Surrounded by fort walls, which have a lot of HP, 2,500. But with little resources in your base, players have to venture out early. They can fish for food in the lake, which consists of muddy shallows and is walkable and dockable, or head out for gold in their hunting camps. Spawns with a fortified outpost, with has 2 attack and 10 line of sight. The corners hold extra gold to mine. So the thing about these palisade walls is, as I read in the description, and as is just the case with this object, is that it has 2,500 HP, which is more than a stone wall has in Castle Age even. So these things are a lot stronger than they look. Alright, we have some furs. And the leaf pile object. It's very nice and thematic. And like a little connection of leaves. I do feel that this type of wall definitely needs to, see lots of use because it looks cool. Alright, we've got our little lakes, which are supposedly walkable. And they are. And this looks pretty cool. The fortified outpost with sort of a hunting site. It does mean that each player has a well-defended site with all of these foxes and some amount of food. But I think thematically, this looks really nice. And I suppose each person's site is very close to the enemy and far from your own base, which is interesting for gameplay. This also looks like it's all shallow. Yeah. These lakes you can also walk on and dock. I mean, apparently you can dock them anywhere. I'll test that too, I suppose. This one cannot be docked. These can be docked. But then again, you'd probably just want a mining camp here, rather than fishing ships. We have leaves on water for little ponds. I think it looks very nice. We generate it again. We have some different orientations. Alright, so it's not in any way fixed positions. Basically, it's using random positions, and we'll rotate around a bit, depending on where the players are. We sort of have this connection here, I suppose, between the players. It's this muddy slope in the middle. Yeah, of course, the corners. But I mean the player positions. I guess an option could have been to have the corners, either these corners or the top, either the sides or the top, but I think this is fine the way it is. I really like this hunting camp. That's a cool idea. And well implemented, or looks nice. Yeah, sure. You can definitely walk through here. I mean, the whole forest is easy to get through. You could steal the boar, but you do... Actually, yeah, that's actually a fair point. Perhaps there shouldn't be a boar here. Like, you might take damage from the tower, but if it's kind of close to you... Although, is there a passage through? I'm not using small trees, but... Like, here there definitely is a path through here. I think there's probably always a path through, because the trees aren't very dense. Yeah, perhaps a boar... Depending on how accurate this tower is, which if it's like a typical non-ballistics building, that could be an issue. Yeah, the trees. Using the maple trees is nice. I like this camp. Alright. Next up, Fort Jefferson, which I will generate. And read the description for. Inspired by Fort Jefferson, a coastal fortress located on Garden Key, a solitary island in the Dry Tortugas National Park. Players are surrounded by circular walls with a bit of wood and gold inside. While there are no boars, 2 beached whales have been washed up and are gatherable after a villager attacks them. Okay. So it's a different implementation. Unlike Redwood River, these have to be attacked and do not auto-decay. They have the same gather rates, but different food values. Gatherable after wood is scarce except for the middle island. Players have to cut through 2 to 3 tile reeds, forced to dock the outside and gain access to the fish or the cornerstones. So yes, we do have more whales that function slightly differently. We will test those again to see the attacking implementation. It still makes the sound of like a caiman or a crocodile. Well, snakes... The snake looks like a giant anaconda, so you're kind of limited onto what style of maps. We have 2 Everglades maps later on, or we might see them. But for most other maps, you probably don't want to have them. Right, so we have the circular walls with gates, which look good. We're gonna have to check out these beached whales. One thing about this chopping through with reeds thing, you basically have to go right away. If you delay too long, if your opponent gets through first and manages to get ships over to your side, they can basically block you from ever getting access. I don't think that's a big issue though, because both players will go for it early. Probably you put your first lumber camp on it, and the distance is pretty far to get ships over. Then we have stone on the outside on these little islands, plus some oysters. The beach, can we walk along the beach? Can. So that means once you get through once, you could send a villager to build a couple docks. You could also technically send a unit all the way around. Of course, it's very easy just to wall it up with a palisade or a dock or anything. And then, okay, so the players themselves, they've got the papaya trees, some gold, and the whales. And then pretty open, and this middle area is basically wood. And then everything else is very open. I'm assuming these are all buildable, yeah. Let's take another look at how the beach dwell is implemented this time. Yeah, I mean this is with the snakes. That's why you have to be kind of careful where you use them. I think if you upgrade a different predator to look like a snake, that will be one way if you don't want them roaming all around the map. No, we don't. So this was Fort Jefferson. Yeah. Okay, so here we've got the beached whale using a perch icon. Interesting. 1 HP, 340 food. So that's the equivalent of a boar. And if we go and hunt it... Okay, that's... gathers quickly. That's a good implementation like this. Don't mind this. The problem is even not even hundreds of snakes, but even, you know, you have 2 snakes, right? And they both go harass the same player rather than one harassing each player, and already you have players complaining that it's not fair. What if the scout attacks it? Does that spoil the meat? Although that's not a thing anymore, right? Yeah. It does start decaying, though. Okay, this I like this implementation of the beached whale as well. Except for the very fast gather rate, I'm not completely sold on that. Also, I'm noticing that we have trees here that I didn't see in the scenario editor. Perhaps either object trees or the previous map was messing things up. Load that one more time. Oh, the trees are there. Okay, so that was just from the previous map. I should probably reload the scenario editor every time. See, now it doesn't look as open as it did before with these palm trees. Yeah, okay, I'll make sure to reload the map every time just to avoid these types of things. Basically, if you upgrade trees in one map, it persists into the next map that you generate, which we want to avoid when we're looking at them right now. Alright, we've got another keys map here. We have Garden Key. Inspired by Garden Key, the main island on Dry Tortugas National Park. Encompassing the side dock ruins as player bases and using Fort Jefferson as the center and the isthmus towards Bush Key, formerly underwater. Players find themselves with scarce resources on shores of an island peninsula that houses a rich fortress. With limited resources in their surroundings, they must venture inland to seize control of the fortress and its environs. Alright, players begin with lots of sheep, a pack of rheas, and near the start of the path encircling the fortress, a small pack of chickens. All animals are birds, symbolizing migratory birds that frequent the area. The starting bases have 2 log pillars for 1,000 wood each, acting like straggler trees, and small amounts of gold and stone. The water contains a fair number of fish, not an exorbitant amount, and some distant sporadic whales, a potential but unreliable source of gold. The coastal area, isthmus, has a large quantities of wood, 200 per bush, geographically imprecise, but disguised for competitive purposes, and a few other resources. A fortress is made of unbreakable, uncapturable walls. Okay, so they're basically just scenery. Let's see. Hopefully, actually walls, units don't aggro on walls by default, so it should be okay. And its interior has little wood, but many resources, such as stone and gold and relics, and immediately outside the walls is a small lake of stagnant water containing some box turtles. And it's walkable, but not buildable. So, let's see if we see that represented in our map. So we see basically the fort here with these walls that are supposedly not attackable. The quick gather rate is basically villagers that don't have a specific task. They're gathering as villagers instead of gathering as hunters or foragers or oyster farmers or whatever. And the gather rate of default villagers is 1 rather than 0.2. That's why. And normal villagers gather very quickly. Alright, so we've got the log piles for wood. I mean, the contest description did say that the maps were not supposed to be too gimmicky in terms of mechanics that are difficult, but both the beached whales and this stuff I think is reasonably straightforward, where players, even if they haven't seen it, could reasonably expect that this would be a wood source. You click on it and you see it is. Let's see. This is shallow water going all around the fort. Okay, so it's basically like a gold rush with gold and stone here. Can you wall it off? That might be relevant to know. Give me a stone wall. Not a seawall, stone wall. Okay, there's some unwallable terrain sitting here. So that's... can't be walled easily. Can I wall like this? No. Okay. So you can't wall out the other players. This top hole perhaps wasn't supposed to be there, which is why I was able to wall it in the first place. You can upgrade other animals. So essentially you have something that is in the game data a deer or is a boar or something, but looks like a whale or looks like a wild horse or a camel or something. I think that's the cleanest way to achieve it, perhaps, is just to upgrade some animal. Or not, yeah, to upgrade it or to change the graphics of the animal to look like the graphics of the thing that you want it to be. Ah, yeah, right, the Riaz birds. So yeah, kind of a water map. You are very exposed here. These do bring 200 wood, but it still feels like if you lose water, you better have migrated to the center. Is there much gold? I guess there are whales. There's some whales in the water. Not a lot of scattered resources other than here. You really have to fight for this area. Ah, this time the gap was filled. I think there might be some small issue with the lands there, probably. And now it's fixed. Alright. Let's look at the next map. Shenandoah. So, Shenandoah. An idealized version of Shenandoah National Park. The theme is to find a home on this Nomad Start map that combines Black Forest, Four Lakes, and Nomad in a very structured way. So, we have these circles. And players start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What's this? What villager is it? And a king. Okay, so players start with 6 villagers and a king. And you can basically choose which circle you want to start in. I think they all have the same resources, although, having said that, I don't see a boar in this one. It's hiding somewhere. Normally there is a boar in them. Maybe I was just overlooking it. And then there's usually passages into the center with some fish there, although you probably want to go for the safe corner fish and just wall it off. Alright, so essentially the only thing that adjusts is exactly where each resource pile is and also exactly where these passages to the center are. I like the nice use of the flowers terrain. And there are... Okay, so each of these between lands has a bunch of hairs for food. Just a lot of food is always important on Nomad. In general, I'm always a bit weary of maps that are too predictable, but here at least you don't know which of these quadrants your opponent will build their TC in, so they could be fairly close or far away, just depending on what they choose. Kind of have to check the whole map. So I think there is some variation in that. Yeah, and the elevation, base elevation for circular lands here is shining through and creating some ridges. Seems. Somehow I didn't always have that issue, like I ran into it and then I didn't have it for some reason. I'm not sure exactly in which situations it doesn't happen. Alright, next up we have Big Cypress. Inspired by mosquitoes, perfect. No. And the Everglades being too swampy, this national preserve is located at the center of reservations and wildlife management areas, with highways running from Naples to Miami. Another hybrid regicide map, players must decide which of the 2 areas, or even 4, to start in, and how much to fish versus land boom. So it's a similar idea to the previous one. Once again, Nomad start. Once again, Nomad start with a king. And this time you're starting in 2 different areas. And we've got these reeds all around. We have the water terrain doing some weird blending issues in the scenario editor, as it sometimes does. But so the starting areas have a bit of everything. Is there a difference between... So is this a greener versus... We have baobab trees, I suppose that's a difference. But I think fundamentally you could pick either side and it would be similar. You can wall it, you can't wall the passage, but you could wall at the edge of the passage. Well, there's some risk, like for tournaments, right? If a map is too predictable, that essentially the meta gets solved, and then players go for similar strategies all the time. That doesn't have to be the case. There are sort of fixed position maps that offer a lot of different things that players can do, but it's a bit of a risk when the map is too predictable. I think in this case, perhaps not squares. Like these days, you could do circular bases here. Might look less artificial. You'd have less space for the players though, but I think circles probably are the way to go now that we can actually make circles. And this middle, it's not many fish, but you'd probably still go for it anyway because players like going for fish. I think I would, yeah, I'd like the other one a bit more. Circles over squares, I would say. Petty as that is. I suppose once again the main variability comes in where players choose to build their TC, which is an advantage of doing a nomad map. That you immediately get some variability just by allowing players to choose where they actually start. Grand Teton. Time to read another description. Inspired by Grand Teton. I mean, most of these maps are inspired by the park that has the same name. Represents 2 large mountain ranges with rivers flowing down the valley. A varied map that comes in 3 different seasons. Okay, we'll have to watch out for that. Each slightly changing the map. Players start down in the valley next to 2 river lakes that spring from the large mountain to the north and south. On top of the mountain is a huge meadow containing a large amount of gold, while the very fruitful middle contains lots of wildlife and some berries next to some stone. Additionally, the map has some slight variation in the lake size next to players, mountain spacing, including a full peak lock, only reachable by transport boat then, and the forest size amount. We'll have to generate a couple of them to see this. Slight variation in the map hopefully hits the perfect balance of consistency and randomness that rewards players who prepare, but also being able to improvise. So, player start areas. I'm seeing a nice amount of terrain blending. And we've got these rivers here. And then we have some mountains. This is not a mountain lock. Very tall elevation. So the gold at the top. And then you can only cross the rivers here and here, which you can just about squeeze past the trees, but of course you don't need to cross one, you can just run through the center. Players, okay, there's stone and gold behind, and the center has some food to fight over. Okay, yeah, there's definitely some variability in the exact shape of things. Frozen version. Here the rivers are frozen. That makes the map more open because you can just run across them. We still have food in the middle though with dick rabbits. We have like a fall season here. Some slight snow at the top. My one thought looking at these rivers is perhaps it's possible to fine-tune the connections so that they don't end up being so excessively wide, or that they're maybe wide up here but then narrow for the rest of the stretch. Because sometimes, like, this super wide slope looks a bit wide, in my opinion. See if we can get a fully locked mountain too. Like here you can still mosey on up, just about. Okay, so this is the fully blocked off mountaintop. That's a nice amount of variation, right? Like for this one you have to control water to get the gold up there. And you've got enough gold to start out with, but in the long run you would want to go up there. And you have the frozen one, which is completely open. Yeah. Okay, I like the variability on that. Alright. Next up, we have Olympic Peninsula. Inspired by the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State, featuring Olympic National Park. Players start on Olympic Peninsula with TCs to the north and to the south of the mountains, and the temperate rainforest on the peninsula. The crescent lies between the northern TCs with plenty of salmon. Other animals include snowshoe hares, deer, black bears, geese, invasive goats, and whales. So, we've got this lake with lots of fish between the players here. Fairly close. You probably can't easily dock it, but of course you don't need to initially, since you can gather most of these fish with villagers, probably all the fish. Okay, then we have a mountain on one side and forest on the other side. And here we have the player positions reversed. So one thing that I'm seeing immediately in that regard is that this player has a huge wood line next to themselves, and this player has mountains. So there's, well, okay, I guess this player is close to the wood line on this side and mountains on this side. I wonder if that's, perhaps it's okay because each player has one TC that's on sort of the rainforest side and one on the mountain side. But there is some asymmetry in that. Is it always blue and red, or okay, they swap around? Yeah, okay, they do swap around at least. That's good. Okay, I see a beached whale. This is just for decoration though. Yeah, this time you would actually need to dock maybe to get to the middle fish. And then we see some remnants of the connection generation here. Could use some mixing in the water, maybe. Some mixing of water terrains. I wonder how this plays out, right? It's a double TC start. You start with chickens underneath the TC to ensure that you get a quick start. Chickens underneath both TCs. Alright. Oh, these goats. Both players' goats are starting right next to each other. That's interesting. Always the case? The goats always start on the mountains. Yeah, I don't know how this asymmetry plays out. Maybe it's okay. And my game crashed. Well, rip. Send error report. I was just moving the map around. So where's my underlay? There we go. I submitted an error report. Don't know what crashed the game there. Very weird. I'll take a break and take a drink. Like, I shouldn't have run out of memory or anything. Plenty of RAM. I don't know. Just randomly crashed. Alright, next up we have South Dakota. This one's taking a while to generate. I like this one from the capture H screenshot that was provided. The screenshot. An open South Dakota Badlands. An open land map with hilly hill plateaus. You start with only 4 turkeys and 1 javelina, but there are enough deer javelinas spread across the map which you can lure or push. Wild jaguars also on the map. The terrain on the player's starting lands, but not under the TC, but starting 8 tiles away from it, is cracked terrain. So 8 tiles away from the TC and further is cracked terrain. But there is a 12% chance of a non-dry season, which we will make sure that we take a look at, where the cracked terrain isn't present and instead some grass which has grown after a heavy rainfall, which is a cool twist to add. Yeah, I feel like I've seen this, like, a similar stripey implementation in some other contest. I was making maybe some sort of World Desert Championship or something where we also had something like this. But you can there's definitely a lot of options for making nice looking sedimentary layers. So this is most interesting. I was told that the cracked terrain begins 8 players away from the TC, 8 tiles away from the TC. That's good. However, this looks like quicksand to me, which I know because I have my grid mod doesn't work on terrains that you can't build on. Which worries me, because I want to be able to build on it. So I think this is still cracked terrain, bottom line. This is probably all cracked terrain, and this is just cosmetic quicksand overlay. Masked. It takes a long time to generate. I like the hills here. And we're also making new use of the new trees. Also use these. It's quite nice that we got more trees. Visually I like this map. Sort of the rugged different layers. Let's see if we can get one of the rainy variants. See what that looks like. There we go. That was easy. Okay, so basically super green around here instead. Nice lush area. And even sort of extending, I guess, all the areas that are below a certain elevation are affected, or perhaps it's the map-based terrain, or the player land has some things sticking out there. Probably just elevation-based. I think it looks nice. Food scenario. Alright, how are we doing? We are almost halfway through. That's good. I should continue at the same pace, so this doesn't take forever. We want to power on through, but take a bit of a thing. So we have our first Everglades map. And we'll go check the description. A semi-open map where players find themselves in a land. Is this actually the first one? Yeah. In a land where some of the times it will be easier to wall than other times, mangrove shallows are abundant. Will you control the map with naval units, or will you go for a land approach? Beware of the wildlife. Snakes roam this land, so all the people who are hoping for a snake map, here you go. You don't want to face the caimans when you're traveling around these lands. So... probably you can build on this. Yeah. Okay, so we've got the players starting sort of on a bit of an elevated terrain. Once again, the new papaya trees. Now we have bamboo, which probably isn't actually local, but makes for a nice jungle. Jungly look. We have, this is just decoration. Always nice to add stuff like this, just to make it look nice. The new palm tree here. Boxes. Yeah, it gives off swampy vibes. And is water worth it? Is kind of the question. You can get to all the fish without going for water. And you can't contest the player's town center with water. Kind of depends on how big the patch is that you're going for. Center might be worth going for. But it's not... it's always a modest amount of fish. Like, it might be worth docking somewhere in the back if you want some fish. Or docking forward if you want to contest your opponent's area. Yeah, the Salt Marsh is the map you're thinking of. Which also had fairly irregular... Probably that's the one you're thinking of. Fairly irregular swampy terrain. The nice thing now is that we have the mangrove swamp terrain. Would be a nice nomad map, but then you couldn't have caimans and snakes roaming around. Don't really want predators on a nomad map. Alright, so the snakes do spawn fairly far away from players. We could do a fun test in single player in a moment. I also like this, you know. Very nice visually to do little tricks like that. Let's see how long it takes for the snakes to reach us on just any random generation like this one here. Right, no snakes, no snakes. Oh, I see something. No, that's a jaguar. A lot of predators on this map, but not close to the TC, right? This starting area doesn't have any. You can get your woodlines at least. And where are the snakes? Oh, swimming. Squiggle, squiggle, squiggle. As long as they start far enough away that you're, you know, not in Dark Age when you get attacked, that's fine. I'm not seeing as many snakes as I thought I would. They're hiding. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I mean, they... Oh, two of them over here. Wait, the snakes are shapeshifting into jaguars? Oh, we have to watch that. Maybe when they're swimming? Are there no jaguars on this map, actually? Oh! Alright, we might have to test... Alright. Well, this might be a scenario editor artifact. That's where all the snakes were. They were jaguars! How silly of me. This is from the scenario editor. We have to test in a proper skirmish match. It could be that jaguars don't have a swim animation or something like that. Something like that. But let's see what happens here. Everglades. A? I think it was A. Alright. Let's find ourselves a jaguar snake. Speed up time. Alright, now it's a snake. When it leaves the water. That's... I don't know what you did there with a jaguar. But that was a very funny bug. I mean, jaguars are the types of things that might sometimes fight anacondas, but very fun. I was wondering why there were so few snakes. Because they were jaguars. Yeah, now they're on land and they're actual snakes. Alright. I think... Well, how far are we in? 6 minutes? Let's just go to like 15 minutes in game time. I think you can be reasonably secure. The only risk is if you try to dock. Right? You say you want to get some fish at a back dock, but even that, as long as you go for a reasonably close dock, you shouldn't have problems. If you do something like this, your docking villager might get attacked. The jaguar thing, that was quite funny. Alright, now they're getting close, I suppose, but we're at 12 minutes in game time. You just have to get loom somewhat earlier, like no fast castle without loom. Or at least no, sending villagers far out to build a dock without some protection. Yeah, I don't think the snakes are a problem for gameplay. By the time they start harassing you, you have enough villagers, you can afford to lose them to snakes. Right, next up we have Zion Canyon. I liked this one based on the screenshots that were posted as well, so let's take a look. Inspired by Zion National Park, Utah, focusing on the main canyon with access out to the desert and up to the forested plateau. Closed in by cliffs on the sides, the river is mapped on the features of Virgin River with 16 different variations. A hybrid map divided in two by Virgin River, the player starts are always mirrored but can be biased heavily north or south. The canyon provides a false sense of security as the bushes on the nearby woodlands contain only 40 wood. Okay. Opening up your walls quickly. The lack of lurable animals in Zion also means you have to commit to fishing, foraging, or hunting in the early game. The river provides plenty of control through the middle, but as your starting resources dwindle, you'll have to choose to fight for wood and stone in the northern forests or gold in the southern desert. So about the 16 elevation thing, I don't know if this has been fixed. But last year, there was kind of the problem that unit accuracy, projectile accuracy was very bad up on that elevation. Like, I made a map where I had TCs at, like, maybe 16 or at least, like, 12 elevation. Elevated player lands. And the projectiles they would be shooting not from the TC, but from an origin point that wasn't close to the TC. And they weren't they weren't really hitting. That's not as much of an issue though if other parts of your map are tall, but your main TC area isn't. Anyway, we've got the river here with a lot of oysters. The south has some gold. Actually, a lot of gold when you consider that there's a bunch of gold in the oysters too. Generally, there seem to be a lot of oysters. We'll have to check in-game to see if these are actually oysters. Because I think they might be shorefish. I don't see them on the screenshot in-game. We'll check that. True, you can kill boars with the TC now, so that is less of an issue. Okay, and we have the top here. Little scenery camp might be capturable. Canyons in the back. This is one of the few maps that use cliffs in this contest, and is also a good realistic use of cliffs. Always difficult to actually achieve that. There's of course some risk that you end up with trapped resources unless you take care to avoid that. But doesn't matter if the wolves are trapped. Kind of don't want a relic trapped. Wood. The bushes only have 40, we said. So it looks like you have a somewhat decent amount nearby, but if it's only 40, that would be low. And I think the center is... So 1 of 16 is... I guess the center is somehow painted with player land, with lands. And then there are just different potential squiggly layouts, so they all look... Okay, that's a different one. Okay, there are a couple of different squiggles. Can happen. And then I think... Let's take a peek in-game as well. Yeah, one thing with the cliffs is you might want to make sure that the resources are never trapped in them, like with require path. Potentially, at least for stuff like the relics. Maybe if if both players have the same amount of stone, it would be good if the stone isn't too hidden in here, so that more than one tile can be mined at once. Although it makes sense, of course, to have like this. Might be nearly trapped. Maybe there's a path here. Tricky cliff business. Hard to use. Well, I like the river. I like the river though. And once again, a waterfall used in a believable way. I guess so. Players can also be further north or further south. That was in the description, and we are seeing that. Here they are towards the top, very far from this gold. Here they're more towards the gold. I want to check out this thing. If it can be captured. Okay, yeah, so the oysters were being used as a placeholder to place shorefish. If you don't want to confuse people in the scenario editor, there are some... You can use the dead fish trap. That's always a good one for placing anything that needs to be on grid. There's also dedicated, like a naval placeholder you can use. I think that's... doesn't matter for actual gameplay, but it's just cleaner so that people looking at it in the scenario editor know that they're not expecting a bunch of oysters. Okay, so this can't be captured. My unit was attacking it automatically. So that doesn't matter, it's just decoration at that point. River can be easily crossed in most stretches. Yeah. Looks very nice. We've got a lot of actually nice looking maps. More even than I suspected from the screenshots that were posted. Some of those I wasn't so sure that I would visually like, but many of them look quite nice. The tent could probably be converted, but I mean 5 pop space. If you want to convert it, so be it. After getting... You can convert it in Castle Age with Redemption to get 5 pop space. Lamar River Valley in Yellowstone. You start in a forest fort with 9 villagers, 2 huts, and a settlement. Safety, but only a few resources inside your walls, while the shallow river and the hilly woodland are rich in wildlife, gold, and stone. This map is probably a map for fans of Fortress and Highland, but with extra villagers to allow for a faster start. You could implement Regicide if you wish to make it even more Fortress-like. So, I'm liking the use of the pastures terrain everywhere here. We've got a lot of bears, although that is thematic for Yellowstone. I don't specifically remember Lamar River, but... Okay, and we're using the walls as well, like... Makes sense, we might as well make use of them. I don't know how much bonus damage they take, how much anti-building bonus damage they take, but it's quite possible that these are... You just have to be aware, how much is a fortified wall? Like a fortified palisade wall is 300, right? Fort wall is 2,500. Fortified wall is 3,000. Okay, so it's weaker than a fortified wall, at least. But it's awfully strong, especially when you compare it to stone wall. Stone wall, right? Has less than half the HP. There might be something to be said for, like, graphically using the RMS to basically give players a fortified palisade wall, but make it look like this, or give players a stone wall, but make it look like this, and not have such a strong wall. But anyway, enough of that. We do have our fortress area where we start with the huts. We have a 9-ville start, which I think is very fair on arena type maps, just to get the action going faster. And then we have our river, which has shallows in random places, but enough to cross. A lot of bears in the middle. I like the use of the pasture terrain, just looks nice. Boxes, wood. Okay, so we basically have 2 orientations. Yeah, perhaps also having a shallows connection, or maybe this is one that uses connection generation, but having at least one of those, or perhaps having... I mean, I guess we've got a couple of connections here, just to make sure that there are enough crossings. I think that's a fairly important thing to do. And the type of thing that players, of course, are going to complain about is, oh no, there are more fish on one side than the other side. But I will not complain about that myself. But it's something to watch for, because that's the type of thing that competitive players look at and they're like, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh no, it's not the same. We don't see overlapping fish very often. It's not an issue though. One thing to maybe do is to keep the non-shore fish away from the shore, so that you can't get them with villagers, but it doesn't need to be the case. For the settlement, we can take a look at the settlement. I think the settlement always spawns next to the berries. as an intentional design decision. It even looks like the berries on the previous one were on top of the settlement, or the settlement's on top of the berries. Yeah, I think there's actually... the berries are partially on top of the settlement. For regarding South American civs, I think... I'm not sure. It's one of these cases where, like, if you make a full... if I in hyper random where I give players a full work, I don't think Poles can actually make use of it. While if I give players a mill, the Polish mill turns into a full work, and then the Poles can actually use it. I think it might be one of those situations. Like, if I give players a fortified church, then they can't make use of it. But if I give players a monastery, and then it turns into a fortified church, then they can. So I think this just functions like a gather point. I don't know, though. Might be worth testing. Yeah, so the berries were actually... that is interesting. I feel like the berries are on top of the settlement. Or the settlement is on top of the berries. Might be something to look into. Yeah. But I think it looks very nice. You might be able to gather the ones that are at the edge. If they're on the middle tile, I think you wouldn't be able to, but the ones that are on the edge tile, like one tile in, you can probably still reach by a villager. I mean, you would drop off assuming you can actually gather them, which... I mean, theoretically... let's spare a moment, we can test it. What's this one called? Lamar. I could also take them Muisca or something. So, okay, so you have some berries inside there. Okay, so we can drop off at the settlement, which is to be expected. Settlement is providing pop space, I believe. 10 pop space, could that be? Send in all villagers to gather these berries faster. Yes, so they can gather the one inside the settlement. So that's actually not a problem that the berries are there. Alright, next up we have Katmai in Alaska around Brooks Fall. It's a national park and preserve on the peninsula in southern Alaska. Its wild landscapes span tundra, forests, lakes, and mountains. The park is known for many brown bears that are drawn to abundant salmon in Brook Falls. So the players start with 2x5 berries, 1x7 gold, 1x1 stone, 4 sheep. We can look at that. The lack of res inside the starting base encourages players to move out for nearby foxes for gold and the river for food, providing a combination of multiple paths for aggression and the relative ease of walling up. The map can spawn in 4 orientations, with the players having a chance to spawn closer together. Key feature to note, Katmai is known for its many bears, which have not been excluded on this map. Important to load the map in a live game, you will see that the brown bears will walk around and growl. Brown bears are found by the river, where there are many salmon, and they're non-aggressive and can be hunted for food. The black bears are on the hills, and you should stay away from those. Okay, interesting. We'll have to load that up. Take a quick look at that afterwards. So, player starting area with the double berries, 1 gold, very little stone. Got the sheep to start with. We do not have a boar, but I suppose we are being encouraged to get food over here, where there are a lot of bears, and supposedly the brown bears are not aggressive. It might have the. We'll see. We'll see. If it could be that it's an upgraded other animal, then it might just be like hunt, or it could be an upgraded deer. Then it wouldn't be the case. But if it's a predator with food, then you can gather very quickly from them. Each of these hills has a stone on it. Yeah, even if the hill is smaller, there's still the 3 stone. And then we have other orientations. Okay, there's gold at the very edge. Relics on the passage between. Map is very flat except for these 3 hills. Could have some more random elevation. Or some... I was going to say forest mixing, but this far north you probably only want to have pine trees in your forest, so I don't know how much you could actually mix. Maybe it is only realistic to have pines, actually. Yeah, I think we need to check out the bears. This field's a bit, like, generic. Where, you know, some small hills, or if there are no hills, just, you know, patches of dirt. Just some cosmetic terrain mixing. Would look nice. And then players definitely need to move out to this area, right? The gold, you need more gold. The gold is over here. Stone is here. Food is here. Probably always wall off. Yeah, I mean that's enough gold for feudal age if you want to. You want to just wall off and fast castle, but by then you really need to get over here. There's no gold in. Actually, you have the foxes for some gold. Sort of in the middle. Check this out with the bears. Alright, so these brown bears are supposedly non-aggressive. Because they're actually hares. That would explain the non-aggressiveness of the brown bears. So they're very slow. They're using the hare sound and icon. I cannot attack them with a scout. They're very slow. But I guess they're fishing, so they don't need to be fast. Yeah, I think they're modified, they're reskinned hares. The sound, yeah... I'm not sure off the top of my head how you do that correctly. It can be tricky to modify sounds. In a map script, I'm not sure you can. Somehow the sound is tied to the graphics, but not always. Like, sometimes it works if you change the graphics that the sound goes with it. I'm not 100% sure how it works. Or you have to pick, shouldn't have picked hares, you should have picked something else that makes a sound that's more bear-like, but I don't know, chickens don't really fill the job there, do they? Not sure. Yeah, I'm not... It's... Players are used to bears being predators. Of course, bears have historically been hunted for food, but it's always a bit of a risk changing the behavior of an animal that players assume will do something else. True, I suppose predators don't move normally, except for the snakes now, but they move way too much. They are wandering around like they're fishing, which does look nice. Conceivably deer could have been an option, one of the deer variants, perhaps. Although then they could be pushed, which maybe you didn't want that, so... yeah, difficult. Yeah, made a new map. All right. Next up we have Great Base. Although if you made them really slow, maybe that wouldn't be a problem with pushing. Like if the bears were actually that slow, like if you took deer, made them so slow, I don't think players would bother to push them. Like that would take you just like 2 minutes to get one of them to your base. It's a thought. Just a random thought I had now. Right, Great Basin. Inspired by the winter season of Great Basin National Park with terrain covered in snow. Players start behind palisade walls with 2 gold mines and 1 stone mine safely inside their base, along with the standard starting resources. Extra gold and stone deposits are placed within forests adjacent to each player's starting position. Players must expand and chop through them to access the extra gold and stone mines. There are also natural hares, neutral hares, and foxes that players need to scout to eat them. So, we've got our palisade forest base, stone gold, standard starting resources, and I think the amount of wood in each base should be roughly equal because we're using some sort of basically avoidance in distance that the forest needs to stay away from players, so it's more or less the same. Okay, and then we have the gold and stone, gold, stone, and the rest of the map has hares and bears and foxes. And the gold and stone, are they always... okay, they can be crossed, that's good. That is some variability. I think I've seen like an earlier iteration of this map in a previous contest as well. I mean, kind of, you basically have to. No, okay. Definitely your first TC needs to go on gold. Yeah, 1 TC on each of these. So it's somewhat predictable in that. But on the other hand, it's fairly easy to defend, I would say. Not too difficult to wall off. Ballista elephant. It's only like 3 lines of trees. Being able to deny the opponents, though, could be huge, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Presumably it's the same number. The other thing that I'm noticing here... 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This one has 4 tiles only. 4 tiles. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That would be something to look into. Of course, they should have the same amount, ideally. Let's try that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, that's something that needs to be fixed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Because you definitely want, given how close they are to the players, or you know, each player has one that's theirs. You definitely need them having the same amount of resources in each. 3, 4, that's a 9. 3, 4, 6, 7. Well, of course, if this map gets chosen, this would be the type of thing that would be updated before the map is used, right? Stone might have the same problem too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It might just be an issue of that the stone is being that each of these resources is being placed on the terrain and not on the specific land. So it's just kind of random wherever there's space. Or it's spaced out too much and it's just not finding room to position them, or it's just a typo in the map script. In any case, it's not difficult to fix. It's just something that to be aware of and to fix when the map is actually used. Like I don't think, you know, if I were judging these maps, and I'm not, it's not the type of thing I would mark the map down for, because it's easy to fix. But it is something that would need to be addressed if the map were chosen. You know, nice to get some more snowy maps again. Like, I don't know how exactly it plays out. You really have to contest the opponent's thing, right? You castle their gold. Then it gets kind of tough because there's no other gold, although it's big enough that you can probably still get some from the far side, but definitely these 2 gold sites are highly contested, but also easy to wall off. Alright, next up. Crater Lake. So I actually looked this one up. I was interested to find out that there is like an actual specific named Crater Lake that's probably the inspiration for the original Crater Lake map. Crater Lake, inspired by the national park and the map, but in my opinion, more realistic looking. In the middle is a lake with a volcanic stone-rich island. The lake has fish, some oysters, and sometimes it's partially frozen, but you always need to travel by ship to reach it. Your starting area seems relatively wallable, but close by you don't have many resources, so you have to wander out to the lake or to the corners of the map as the game progresses. And there you'll be very vulnerable because all the rocky terrain around the mountains of the crater is unwallable. So, this is the volcanic crater in the middle. I'm liking the use of the black terrain here. I hope that we get a lava terrain at some point. Like, it would be useful also for people making fantasy maps and for, you know, the occasional maps that have volcanoes. I think that would be a cool terrain for us to get. So there's a lot of unwallable terrain. At first, of course, that reminds me of something like Land Madness, but here the woodlines are wallable, while the unwallable area is area that you don't need to wall as such. It just means that the map is relatively open. It's interesting. It's sort of like a reverse Land Madness. I assume that you can't mine these stones, that they're just decoration. You can check that in game. Which means that you basically just have unwallable areas, but walling is still possible, just tricky. Land sadness. I also think it's, you know, very reasonable use of the rock terrain. Like, often on maps like Land Madness, it sort of feels a bit artificial to have it surrounding woodlines, or just generally on competitive maps to have it in a random place, but having it surround rocky mountains, that seems realistic. Or like rocky slopes here. This whole crater, I assume you can build stuff. Okay, let's get like a mining camp. That's what you'd actually want to build. Ah. So you can't build mining camps? Okay. That's fine. That you can't build here. So the center is entirely cosmetic. The stone on it can't be mined. Bring the stone back on a transport ship. Yeah, is there a stone on the rest of the map? You start with a bit. This is a very cluttered, noisy terrain mix. Difficult to actually spot things, but... Yeah, okay, I like this variation better. So that was the snowy one, this is a less snowy one. With snow terrains, this is just a personal thing, but... You know, a lot of people don't like them because they're blindingly white. I don't like the ones when it's, like, sort of the snow mixed with another terrain and there's too much contrast, so it's hard to see things. But here, okay, we've got 2 stone. 2 stone. Yeah, I think the intention is probably that you're able to mine this stone in the center. But, I mean, getting it by transport ship is too much work. There's still some stone. There's also not that much gold at the starting base. The intention was in the description that you move out. Perhaps there just needs to be more in the way of neutral golden stone. You can get the oysters, I suppose. Assuming you can dock, which probably can. Docking is possible. Perhaps the neutral stone piles need to be more frequent or larger. Probably larger. Be good. Just so that there's more neutral gold to get to and to. Like here, there's a nice bunch. And maybe spread out more evenly. And not clustered too much. Tricky with all the unwallable areas, but I think that would be important to achieve for competitiveness. That there's a good spread of golden stone. The golden stone, you could place it on top of the unwallable terrain. That's not necessarily a problem, because people can build a mining camp a bit further away and walk. So there's, yeah, snowy and non-snowy. I worry about this in the center. Can we build, like, anything? We could build a wall on it. Maybe it's just too sloped for a mining camp? Wasn't there one of the civilizations that can build on slopes? Like one of the Greek ones, maybe? Okay. Okay, so in principle you can build, it's just too sloped. Maybe, I don't know, you need some flat areas or something so that you can actually build on it, or to have the elevation step or something. Rations? Yeah, let's... That's not what I wanted to test. What was this called? Crater Lake. It was just a random... Ooh! I saw a random explosion there. If this volcano is actually active and sends out projectiles, I know the Mad Catter made once an implementation that did that. That would be very cool. Alright, let's just give ourselves infinite resources to go do this. I need a house too. Come on, unload. What's going on? What am I doing? Oh, garrison. Sea shelter. Oh, I still have villagers selected. Right, so if I wanted to build... I mean, a TC is never gonna work. Yeah, okay, you can build in the center. There's also some awkwardness happening here. Yeah, we can't actually build in the center because there's like a invisible something blocking it. Okay, can we build at the edge of the center? Huh. This middle area is blocked. There's something... I don't think you can fit very much up there. Let's try Thracians, just for fun. Where is it? All buildings can be built on any elevation. But see, there's an explosion at the start of the game. It's a Lembos. I don't want a Lembos, I want a transport ship. Also, I'm liking people using the watercolor correction. So, now the moment of truth. Can we just... I mean, TCs are excluded from that, but can we just build... We cannot build a lumber camp then. Scammed! Scammed! What's going on? Maybe you're not supposed to be able to build here either, and this is actually rock terrain masked. With a barracks? Okay, I think there's actually rock terrain masking it, and we're basically building on the edge of the black terrain where the whatever blockers aren't extending far enough to block me from building there. Bottom line is I think it should be buildable. Normally you should be able to build mining camps on any slope anyway. So probably this would be a case where you do want you use the buildable rock terrain instead and not have this whole thing be unbuildable terrain. Or you keep it entirely unbuildable, but then you need more stone on the outside. Like around these mountains, maybe some stone. In any case, I think this is not intended. I think this is supposed to be blocked, and then the blockers are not quite blocking me from getting a mining camp up. Mule cart! Ooh, mule cart! Mule cart! Yes, you transport a mule cart over, right? Of course, that would be OP. Yeah. Yeah, right. This is an excellent comment earlier too. I see now the comment about Georgian and Armenians, right, with the mule cart. You need to have buildable terrain there. At least some patches of it. I like the map otherwise, though. And the sort of the reverse land madness type of idea. Alright, now we have our other Everglades map. Inspired by a tropical swamp with too many dangerous animals. Two big land masses on which the players start are separated by a swamp which contains most of the gold in the shape of oysters, in the form of oysters, on the shore of the mangrove islands, but also shipwrecks with lost explosive freight, gunpowder kegs. That's fun to see those used in a map. And lots of alligators, caimans. You can actually rename the caimans into alligators. I don't know if you did that, we'll see. Snakes and panthers. The alligators and panthers are defensive, so they won't follow you out of the swamp, which is interesting. We'll have to see how that works. Maybe test it in-game as well. The placement and shape of the mangroves is very variable. Almost all the water is shallow terrain, so naval warfare is not necessary, but can be very useful compared, similar to Golden Swamp. Take control of the oyster reefs. So, let's take a peek. Okay, I think here we have the water effect, but I think this is masking. This is actually land terrain. I assume we can't have any ships on this. Yeah, only. Yeah, so that's fine. This reminds me, I think, of the Greenland map. Maybe not. It looks very swampy. It's a convincing swamp effect. We have some flags here, okay, for the deer positioning. We've got our gunpowder kegs. We have snakes in the middle. Okay, so the gold is... Okay, there's some around the players. Just a bit. And then there are supposedly oysters, which I see. There's some oyster islands in the middle. Yeah, it's another nice... It's a different take on Everglade, on sort of making a swamp than the other one, but still gives off a similar vibe. That looks nice. And what was it again? The snakes and... Which animals don't follow? Alligators and panthers don't follow you out of the swamp. I'm interested to see how that is implemented. We can take a look at that. You are elevated, which is good. So water isn't necessary in the description, but I think players would go for water here just because there are fish. And you can contest the whole middle with water. And I think even after the naval rework, ships are stronger than land units or more cost efficient. If you can fight on amphibious terrain. Each player starts with 2 relics on their side, it seems. Yeah. Yeah, let's take a look at... I want to take a look at the predators being on defensive. Let's get Spanish again since I have no bonuses. Starting bonuses that will be relevant. Everglades B. Some weird stuff with the water happening, but that might just be the game planning. Let's see. Can the scout attack a barrel? Yes? Let's not blow it up. Let's find one of these animals on defensive stance. Yeah, there's something weird going on with the 3D water rendering. I don't know if that's just on my end or if it's... Supposedly these are on defensive. And they are. Interesting. I don't know how that's implemented. It could be that it's a Gaia unit that's been reskinned as a predator. So, like, you know, it's a swordman that's been, but it has all the caiman stuff. So, or like a swordsman or something that's been upgraded into a predator. It's very fitting for crocodiles, or caimans in this case, to stay close to the water. That's something I'd be interested to look at how it's implemented in the map script. Because I think that would be cool for specifically for crocodiles, alligators, caimans, for water predators to keep them in the water. Okay, this seems to be a patch of deeper water. Or doesn't look like deep water though. Oh, but it is deeper on the mini-map. Okay. I attack this guy? Yeah, if you have unconvertible Gaia units, they behave like this, so it's probably something like that. Upgraded from one of those. Interesting. I like that. Basically makes it risky to send out villagers in the middle, but you're not at risk of having the villagers chased all the way back home. Alright, here we're gonna have to look at this one in game too. Grand Staircase Escalante, which I think is a national monument. The map is divided into 3 regions, separated by steep elevations similar to the real-world location. One region has the most gold, another region has the most stone, another region has the most wood. Relics in the lake, and a lake with some fish spawn in opposite neutral corners. So for this one, the wood lines are being created with objects, so we're gonna have to look at them in game. They don't appear in the scenario editor. The advantage of this approach is that you can ensure completely fair wood lines. The disadvantage one is that they don't appear in the scenario editor, and also if you play explored, I think they might not appear until you scout them, which can be awkward. Got sort of our treasure with gold down here, so there's a bunch of wood here. This section has the food, I suppose. More food up here, gold up here. Let's generate it again. Okay, this time we have... Okay, this time the sparse desert is down here, and there's more wood up at the top. A lot of bears guarding this lake with only a few fish, so you don't send an early villager to dock this. Ever, I would say. Unless you're Magyars, maybe. Start with a horse scout. Okay, so the 3 sections can vary as to which one is where. Well, here now, this time the treasure area is there and the lake is down here. Grand Bear Case. Grand National Escalator. And I think this is probably unwallable quicksand the entire way across here and here as well. Alright, we need to look at it in game. This looks too open if we keep doing this. Yeah, so the wood lines will appear in-game. All visible, they appear right away as well, which is good. So we have, one area that has lots of wood lines. And then sort of smaller ones everywhere else. It's fairly open. The distance between players is further than it would be on most maps because of the corners. But kind of defensible just by virtue of being able to wall to the corner, but fairly open. I think with this many bears, yeah, you can't easily go for that. And you kind of need to fight for every level, probably. Because the wood area doesn't have much golden stone. Well, the golden stone area doesn't have much in the way of wood. And you need to fight for the middle for the food. Yeah, very open map. But looks nice. And gives players, you know, some variability in what they need to go for. Alright, next up we have Great Sand Dunes, inspired by the National Park. Towering sand dunes seem out of place, and yet there they are, prominently visible far away. In this adaptation, the dunes are an important area of high ground from which to dominate the map, and they hold scattered gold and numerous hares. Players start just across the shallow creek, where in modern times you might be staying at a campground. The surrounding lands hold all the wood, as well as ample resources to encourage expansion in all directions. So this is one of the ones I made. We have this very tall elevation in the center, with the gold in between. You probably can't build TCs in many locations, probably not anywhere to be honest. But you could certainly build anything else in the center. I mean, I guess there are a few spots where you might be able to squeeze in a TC, but not close to the gold. Can't rely on having a good TC spot. That seems to be the only one in this generation. That could be an issue, just if there are any at all. And then you've got this shallow creek that can be crossed. Has lots of shore fish. My general idea was I wanted to make it look like the real site, which has this sort of stream, creek, river, and not have this be overly important despite being a major feature, which is why I made sure there was, you know, the standard amount of starting gold plus another one. There's at least some gold on the outside to go for, some stone. Well, all the stone is on the outside. Enough on the outside that hopefully you don't dominate entirely by castling the center. And yes, a ridiculous amount of hares. It's very open in the center. It might be too snowbally in the middle, I don't know. But I like what I made here. Yeah, I think there's one specifically called like the Tall Dune. I don't know, I thought it was very striking to have basically like typical sandy desert dunes in the middle of an area that's otherwise not a sandy desert. It's just an unusual contrast. I thought it would make for an interesting map. And then the other one that I submitted is Mesa Verde, inspired by Mesa Verde National Park. Players start in the safety of a sheltered alcove with 12 houses, but the safety is deceptive because settling under a cliff overhang doesn't provide easy access to resources. Players only have a bit of stone within their walls, and everything else must be brought in from the outside. To facilitate this, players start with a lumber camp on a nearby woodline. The center of the map holds numerous animal and mineral resources, with fighting over at close quarters. The outside of the map is permanently inaccessible and serves as decoration only. I think for Kobuk Valley, which you're mentioning, I believe that was made for Alchemy League for the Alaska Alaska season, I'm pretty sure that was one of the sites that was the map was made for that, like Kobuk Delta. Yeah, we could only make 2. I think there are a lot of interesting national parks to limit ourselves to. Yeah, for this basically I wanted to have something that looks kind of like the villages under the cliff overhangs that are in Mesa Verde. You can't really use cliffs properly, so I use these desert rocks. And then sort of represented at the buildings there with houses. And then I was worried that you would be able to hide units behind the rocks, so I changed the occlusion mode. It doesn't show outlines for the buildings, but it does if you try to hide units behind. It's good. And then like the general premise idea that you need to bring in resources from the outside. I remember that was kind of the explanation of why these settlements were abandoned, just due to changes in the climate. They needed to bring in resources and they couldn't bring in enough food. It was sort of the suspected explanation for why they were abandoned eventually. So yeah, except for some stone, everything is outside. TC is kind of far away from those resources. So really the walls are only protecting farm space. But I suppose walling off a larger segment isn't too hard. And then beyond that, I think it kind of plays out similar to Arena. Or something like Socotra, maybe. The outside is just random animals. I did test, so it doesn't seem... I think villagers don't like bug out trying to get to it. The AI might bug out. Like it might not be great for the AI to play on. That would be one concern. Don't know if that's actually the case or not, but it seemed villagers at least were fine. I also use the new South American forest mix because I think it looks nice. That's a nice remixed forest. And somehow I didn't have the bug with the elevation, base elevation. Maybe if I had taller elevation around, then it would be a square, but here I was able to get the circle elevated without causing weird ridges in neighboring areas. I'm not sure why. I suppose it depends on how much radiation there actually is and whether it gets into the water specifically. Not impossible, but don't know if that would be a big enough factor. Because low amounts of radiation, if they lead to cancer by the point where you've already, had kids and they've already had kids, then if you die slightly younger from cancer as a grandparent, it doesn't necessarily wipe out your settlement. Depends. And then we have one more map. We have Dry Tortuga. So that site actually is the one that saw the most. Like we had 2 Everglades maps. There was also one other site that I think we had 2 representations of, but this one here we've had 3 at least representing this area. But I suppose there aren't that many good water or island locations. Dry Tortuga is a water map with a Jefferson Fortress in the middle. The center has an abundance of golden relics, while the outer edges has wood. I just find it interesting that multiple people have picked this location. We have the hexagonal fort again in a different rotation. Here we have a Gaia wall, and the description doesn't say anything about it, so we'll have to test it. even a Gaia wall with a gate, which is fancy. I'm not sure how that was implemented. Probably hard coding position. The center contains gold stone relics, basically everything of importance. There are very few fish on the outside. Generally, a map like this, my first concern probably would be, okay, the base is very exposed to water, and there's a lot of water on the map, but with 4 fish, players probably wouldn't go for water, honestly. Also wood lines. There's wood here, and a bit of wood here, but there's not that much wood on the map overall. That could be an issue. I think this one was made right at the, or was finished very close to the deadline, right? It was submitted right at the end. So probably it would have benefited from having another couple hours to work on, I think. Also just, to add a normal amount of fish, probably to add some terrain mixing in the water. Maybe some terrain mixing here, or to figure out how to add a few more wood lines for the players. And then for these Gaia walls, we're going to have to take a peek at those. My first thought is, okay, it's very, very close. You can, of course, sneak around there and maybe get through here. Or you have to actually break through the Gaia wall, which is probably what players would do. Yeah, I think they were having some issues trying to figure out things for this map. And managed to get it done, right by the deadline. But I don't know, there's tree in the gate. I don't think you can use the gate, so it probably doesn't matter in this case, but I think this map probably could use some more work to get it into sort of a finished state. Let's see how the wall is implemented. Hopefully the wall doesn't convert to the first player to see it. That would be the worst way, but yeah. Ah. Yeah, okay, yep, this map needs a bit more work. Although, maybe it's not the worst to have the segment in front of you get converted, so you have access to the center. I retract my statement, okay. No, okay, that's actually clever, never mind. Gates do this weird thing when you convert them where, like, not all the components, like the middle changes. But overall, that's actually very cool to have this segment of wall convert. You have access to the center, but you don't have this part converting. Yeah, this has to be intentional, or at least it works out in a way that's very useful. I don't think you'd be able to get through a Gaia gate otherwise. Interesting. I like that idea. Probably you could just have a player wall immediately here, and then sort of block where the rest of the player wall would be. But this implementation might be easier to make it work. I like that. I was a bit worried about this map, but that adds a neat touch. Still think it could benefit from some terrain mixing on the water and on the grass. Probably an even distribution of fish, like you don't want 3 fish for this player and 1 for this player. You either don't want any fish, or you want sort of an even spread of fish. And then probably some more wood lines in the center around the players. In general, wood is an important resource in AoE 2, and not that much of it on this map, except right here. Cool trick here though with the wall being partially convertible. Alright, so I think that's basically everything that I want to go through. This has probably been a 2-hour stream at this point. Yeah, about 2 hours. So I will be saving, if you joined late and you want to see what I said about the earlier maps or about your own map and you missed it, the VOD or a video of this will be available on my Twitch, wherever. And I'll also back it up on YouTube as well. So you'll be able to watch this again. And I think there were some cool maps. I thought quite a lot of them I liked visually. And I thought were sort of neat representations of the location they were trying to depict. And also quite a few of them looked nicer in-game than they did on the screenshots that were posted, was my impression. Death Valley. Yeah, someone else mentioned that to me too. That they were surprised that there wasn't one, or that I wasn't making one there. It's very dry. It's just a generic, very open desert map. You can put some oases in there, but I don't know. I mean, if we go through, we have several maps. Several maps did rivers. Several maps did walled starts. We had quite a few of those. And we had this key with Fort Jefferson was depicted once there, another time there. It was depicted 3 times, yeah. Well, we had a good mix of maps. A lot of maps with rivers in them. And a fair number of walled starts. And then sort of a mix for the rest. Yeah, I think I could imagine some of the maps that don't get, that don't get picked still might be used in future events. Or could be used in a future installment if there are more national park maps. Could have another contest to make more. Yeah. Fun to look at. Thank you for joining me. And good night, everyone. Good evening. I will put on an overlay somewhere. Overlay new. Is that the one? Yeah, there we go.